Daniel Ellsberg worked in the Pentagon and in Vietnam during that war, and he made public, at the risk of serious prison time, the Pentagon Papers, evidence that greatly eroded support for the Vietnam War. Much has been written, and at least one movie has been made about his life. He has been with us opposing the current war, and he has been arrested in Crawford, Texas, of all places. Dan is the author of Secrets, a memoir of Vietnam and the Pentagon Papers. And he has been calling on members of the Bush administration to find the nerve to do what he did, and that is to release evidence. Many of us are of the opinion that we don't actually need any more evidence, but we'd love to have it. And we had a discussion earlier, and Dan made a very interesting point, I thought, about how working to cut off funding for the war and working towards investigations and impeachment go together and help each other. And maybe he'll be so kind as to share that with us. Daniel Ellsberg.
All right. That's what Dave was suggesting that I mentioned earlier, the synergy between these approaches. The way to get to impeachment, in my opinion, and to get a cutoff is by the same route. Pressure on Congress to do what it would otherwise is very reluctant to do, investigate in ways that will prove the criminality and the recklessness of the White House, of the President and Cheney. No problem getting Cheney into this, by the way, on the criminality of torture, for example, and a number of other things. You get the investigations. The White House stone walls, that can be predicted with certainty. And in those circumstances, as we found in '73, even Congress, even the President's own party, Republicans, can get their back up on this when they're humiliated and ignored and the President refuses to give them anything. And so they press further on this thing and they begin to talk impeachment for the first time because the President is obstructing justice and obstructing their role. And meanwhile, you pick up votes on the cutoff of funds, eventually, as it goes along. And as these two things go along, the President finds himself in a position where he may not believe that he's likely to get impeached, but he has to work at it. He has to assure that he doesn't get impeached. And in that case, he can't use his capital up fighting on the war necessarily. Finally, what if you don't try to impeach? Then you are accepting, we are accepting, and Congress is accepting, as Nancy Pelosi is in principle doing right now. But I say, all right, don't worry too much about that. The point is to fight that dialectically, to move along on a dynamic here, which in event changes the environment in Congress and in the public, where Nancy Pelosi will be for impeachment too, as a matter of fact. But that doesn't happen overnight. It comes through a process. But the very statement right now that impeachment is not on the table by Pelosi is, as Cindy said, appalling, because to fail to do what you can to do this, even if the Democrats were still in the minority, even if they were in the minority, is to accept what the President is saying, I am above the law. There is no restraint. What his lawyers, a handful of lawyers, only this handful of lawyers, but they work for the President, have told him. His inherent powers as Commander-in-Chief are literally limitless. There is no restraint that Congress has put or can put on him, or the courts can put on him, and of course the UN can't put on him. An international opinion, that of course he ran against international opinion, and the UN. But he's going further than that and saying the laws don't apply to me, the torture laws, the FISA law doesn't apply to me, I can wiretap, I can surveil to any extent legally, and that's the power I have. He is claiming, we can say slightly euphemistically, but it's fair enough, accepting monarchical powers. But that doesn't mean it goes back to George III. The rescinding habeas corpus goes back to John I. That's 700 years earlier. And that's really rolling back civil liberties and democracy, and that's what he's up to. I was told today, We can't, yes, the Democrats might restore habeas corpus, you know, this is the core of civil liberties legislation, concept. They might restore it, but he'll veto it. All right, he'll veto it. And I heard the judgment, we won't get an override on that. Won't get an override on restoring habeas corpus. What that means is we've got an entire Congress that should be impeached. Nearly